Today, we resume our webinar series where we're looking at the ways in which ISVs and enterprise application teams are creating value by leveraging the best or the latest integration technologies. And in today's case, we look to CData, who is a leading provider of connectivity solutions and a partner company with Servoy. But before we get going too much further, I should introduce speakers in this webinar. I'm Sean Devlin, and I run the ongoing tech series webinars. And I'm happy to be joined once again by CData's technology evangelist, Jared Johnson. Jared, are you there?
I am here, and it is my pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. Now, Jared and I did a webinar together back in right at the beginning of March, which feels like a different era or an age ago. And we wanted to introduce the same topic back then. And I can remember, Jared, at the end of that webinar, we had, I think, a lot of questions and a lot of interest in what we were showing. And then even after the webinar, I had a lot of follow-up with Servoy customers about different types of possible integration. So it really reaffirmed to me that this is a very interesting topic to our community. And then since that was early March, the world changed pretty quickly. And I had sort of lined up a number of proof of concepts and follow-ups in our community. And much of that sort of went to the back burner, understandably. So I wanted to kind of revisit this topic, though, because we're seeing that this is still a very interesting topic in our community. Now, for those of you who weren't in that webinar before, maybe I think it helps, Jared, if you can just kind of give us an overview of who is CData and what do you guys do? Jared, are you there?
There we go.
You're on mute.
You know,
okay.
You would think after 7 months of doing Zooms and WebExes that I would have figured out unmuting, but here we are. So yeah, so happy to do an introduction. CData Software is a leading provider of data access and connectivity solutions. Our motto, kind of the slogan that we use, is we want you to be able to see the world as a database. So we help businesses and their users connect with data. And the way that we do this is through database standards for connectivity. So standards like JDBC, ODBC, ADO.NET, and the list goes on. And what we provide is real-time database-like access to business applications, databases, web APIs, and more. We currently support, I think we're pushing 200 different data sources. So these are web applications like Salesforce, HubSpot, etc. These applications can be on-premise or in the cloud. We also support NoSQL data sources. We support even the relational data sources that customers are used to seeing. So it really just simplifies that connectivity solution. And the way that we do this is through translating the SQL queries that either users generate or applications generate into API requests. So users get a seamless experience with their data. As far as they're concerned, it looks just like connecting to a database. And we do this for every business case. So whether you're looking at a CRM or ERP data source, whether you're looking at accounting, e-commerce, it really doesn't matter where your data is. If you have data that's behind an API, there's a really good chance that CData makes a driver for it that simplifies connectivity.
Yeah, I think what's exciting for this community is just the number of connectors that you guys have. If you go to their website and their list of connectors, they're organized by category, and you know, these topics come up all the time in conversations I have with our community, and it may be something technology related, like can I connect to an S3 bucket on AWS or something like that, or it may be something you know, that's motivated by a business requirement. Often these are being able to connect to, well, with ISVs, their customers' cloud services such as SAP or Salesforce or that sort of thing. But it's the sheer number of connectors, I think, adds a lot of value for our community, and the fact that everything is standard. Jared, you were talking about how if it has an API, you can basically have a CData driver for it. What I want to know is, a lot of our developers are very talented, and RESTful web services are fairly standard. So why do I need a connector to connect to an API? Why don't I just code it myself?
Yeah, and I mean, and that's a great question, and it's one that comes up a lot. I think that the biggest thing is it really comes down to saving resources, and whether that's man hours or financial resources for all of the work that goes into integrating with an API. There are a lot of problems that you have to solve when you integrate with an API. You're looking at the data type mapping, you're looking at authentication, whether that's through basic or something complex like OAuth. You have to manage performance. You're looking at the different types of features that are available in an API, whether that's sorting, filtering, searching, even joining data. So for anyone that's not familiar, Salesforce, for example, has, as part of their API, the capability to join entities based on what essentially are foreign keys.
Right.
But if you're writing that integration and you want your customers to be able to use it, you have to implement that. And I mean, that's what we do. This is our business. Right. So we save you all that time. If you're doing a one-off integration, it's one thing. But if you have ongoing customers, or you have a broad spectrum of customers, you're looking at either doing the same kind of integration multiple times, or maintaining an integration as APIs change. My favorite example of this is Facebook. I feel like Facebook changes their API every day, and there's always an update. There's always something being added, something being deprecated, something being changed. And if you're a developer, you're responsible for handling that. At CData, we handle all of that on the back end. The only thing that you need to do is download the latest driver and install it. And the big thing here is, not only are we handling all of that API integration, but as far as you as a developer is concerned, you're getting a single interface for your data. So it's always SQL. It's always like talking to a database, whether you're working with Salesforce, whether you're working with Facebook, whether you're working with SAP, Google BigQuery, something like Alfresco, or all of these different APIs. So it's a choice to make, but if you're doing lots of different integrations with lots of different services, having this universal connector make a big difference.
Yeah, I think of it as kind of like a total cost of ownership, and this comes up a lot in software. That connecting to an API is fairly easy, but that's just the beginning. And I know from experience that things like OAuth, I mean, you get into like, well, where do I store credentials and refresh credentials? And for our customer base, they may be deploying this on premise to hundreds of sites. And in that case, it may be that every connection is configured differently. And so that has to be externalized. And the more you put this into a real world scenario, the less it becomes about just writing a REST, HTTP request, and more about how does this work with a business application. So I after doing the kind of proof of concepts we did earlier this year, I definitely can feel the value, because even things like that are more data native, like sorting and filtering and searching, Servoy does those very well. We have a really mature data browsing engine, and it works really well against databases. So when you try to translate that to web APIs, it doesn't necessarily fit. So I think that's a big value add. Maybe that leads me to my next question, Jared. Can you talk a bit about like how does it work? How do you turn an API, which is not like a flat data model by nature often? how do you turn that into something that does look like a database?
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as Servoy customers are concerned, the big draw is going to be the JDBC connectivity, which gives you, standard drop-in connectivity. As far as your Servoy apps are concerned, it's like talking to a database. And the way that we do this is by kind of analyzing the API and looking at the entities there that are exposed by that API and surfacing those entities as tables and views. So if an API endpoint has read and write capabilities, as far as Servoy is concerned, it's a database table with read and write functionality.
Okay.
An endpoint is read-only, then it is a database view. So obviously it's read-only.
Right.
We have support for sub-collections and relationships between entities. I mentioned Salesforce before, but this, it exists across a lot of APIs. You could have a sales order and a sales order line item. Well, obviously there's a relationship there. With the CData driver, you can tap into that relationship to build visualizations or reports or charts or do analytics, whatever the case is.
Right.
And then one of the other cool things that we do is there are a lot of things, endpoints in an API that represent operations and not really entities. So something like uploading a document or generating a report or sending an email, for instance. These don't have a direct translation to a table or a view. And it's in those cases that we surface a SQL stored procedure. So it looks like a database stored procedure that you can call just like any other stored procedure, pass your parameters, and perform those operations that you would be able to do with the API.
Right. Yeah, and what I would add to that is that I got really excited about when I saw how these drivers work because, well, number one, I think the first thing that you said was that you guys analyze the APIs. I know from experience when you're trying to build an integration around an API, you spend a lot of time just learning how does it work, how do they store stuff, how do they expose stuff, sometimes you can get a list of things, but when you want to get related data, it's different, or sometimes you can request it in the same request, and then the next level is optimizing it. Okay, well, now that I know how it works, now I have to make it perform. I have to call it in the right way to match my use case. And then when I think about Servoy, we have like 2 decades of optimizing database access for a user to be browsing through applications, things like lazy loading and caching and dealing with related data and searching and filtering, etc. So when these two come together, I get really excited because it just feels like a native database access in Servoy, and you get all of the same good stuff dealing with databases as you would normally get. And you don't even have to think about all the work that went into analyzing that API and optimizing for it as well. Because I know you guys are probably doing like a lot of caching and prefetching, or I can't imagine to make some of these APIs performant in the way that a user will work with them.
Yeah, I mean, if an API has support for things like paging or preloading results or anything like that, our developers are working to leverage those to give you as seamless an experience with your data as is possible. Right.
Okay. Well, thanks for giving us the overview, Jared. I wanted to talk a bit about how Servoy customers can experience this technology in their own applications. And in these types of, in this tech webinar series, where we want to show what's possible, we typically like to show examples of real world applications built by real developers rather than a hypothetical demo. And that really showcases a topic or a feature. But in this case, we didn't really have any existing CData integrations because this partnership is new. And we sort of set up this campaign about integrations, and then leading up to it, we wanted to work with Servoy customers rather than just do another hypothetical demo. And so kind of at the last minute, we reached out to a few of our customers to see if they would want to be involved in like a mini proof of concept. And I was kind of expecting, well, you know, people are really busy, and the timeline we're giving for this is not very kind. It's a short turnaround time. But in fact, I was surprised because I think everyone that we reached out to initially was very excited and had more than, you know, one or two integration ideas that they wanted to test out. And so with that, we ran a few proof of concepts last week, and I wanted to feature two of them. And so I'd like to first introduce the first proof of concept we did with EV, which is a life sciences company, and one of our implementation engineers worked with Miguel Angel Almudever. Miguel, are you there?
Here I am. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Before we get into the technical stuff, can you quickly talk about who EV is and what you guys do and how you use Servoy in your business applications?
Sure. EVRMA is a company dedicated to infertility. So basically what we do is that we help couples to have their babies when they cannot do it on their own. So it's a very, very nice business where we make people very happy. Sometimes it takes long, but finally having a baby, you know that there's a moment in life which is very important. And so we do this with Servoy because Servoy has been our partner for more than 10 years. We started with FileMaker, and then our natural evolution was Servoy. And so here we are, and as I said, since then, working with Servoy to build our health information system, as you said, with many integrations and many problems that obviously we could address with tools such as the one we were just talking about.
Right, and I know you guys already do a lot of integration work because EV is such a large enterprise. I know that that you've worked with our implementation engineers and you have your own team doing. I remember talking to you at Servoy World about some of the other integrations you did. So I think it made sense when we came up with this topic. Can you tell us a bit about what you did last week with one of our implementation engineers, Paolo? I know that you initially looked into, I think, Alfresco, but then you settled on Navision. Can maybe first talk about the use case, why this is important from a business perspective, and then how did the POC go?
Okay, yeah. So as you said, the invite came from Paolo to join this proof of concept. So Paolo is usually in touch with two of our lead architects in the team, Ismael and Samuel. So obviously, as soon as he told us about it, they were very pleased to see what was going on and what we could do that was new to us, right? And so what we did basically was to check the list of integrations that we could manage for database, for document management. We use Alfresco as our repository, and we also use Navision on the financial side. Okay, so those two, which usually bring difficulties in terms of performance, integration, how to share data, how to consistently share data between applications, were very simple to address as a first target to test software. And we tried with Alfresco. It was a little bit more difficult, and we had to enable features that supposedly we didn't have enabled in Alfresco, so it was easier to move to Navision. So that's why within those 2-3 days that we've been talking about this and doing some work on it, we did it on Navision. And yeah, the use case that we decided to use is one screen that we have, which is basically the account balance of our patients, which is a heavy and complex set of data because we have many clinics around the country, in Spain, also in Italy, also in Portugal. So to be able to manage that account balance, we need to extract data from different companies and to aggregate everything and put it together and to share it. So we just wanted to try how CData could help us with this, and it did. So it was easy to set up. At first, we had obviously some difficulties to be able to engage to both sides of the integration. We came over that. And then obviously we didn't have time to check performance or other things that are important on these kind of integrations, but the data was there very easily and it was very powerful. Very simple to set up, very, very simple.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And the screenshot we're looking at is actually was a form. Is that a form that is showing data that was pulled from the Vision and integrated into the existing application? Is that what we're seeing?
Right. So what you can see there is the total balance of a patient, and that information comes from different tables, different databases within Navision, and basically we put that together to be able to have all that information on the services that have been rendered to our patients, the cash that has been collected from them, and the different services and balance that there is filtered by day, by totals, what's paid, what's remaining, what has to do with insurance companies. So that kind of information that is difficult, but easy to manage when you provide that data aggregated, right? Right.
Very cool. Very cool. And then do you feel like this is something you'll continue going forward? Was it?
We will, but we don't know where, because it really depends. What we were discussing is that this is very useful when obviously you need to build integrations or APIs or web services or whatever, right? And you don't have access to the database. In this case, with Navision, for example, we have access to the database, so we can, part of it, we can do it. And we want to really compare performance, and if we can improve performance and we can improve reliability of the application, so we will continue with that. But we had access to the data, right? And for other integrations such as Alfresco, where we don't have access to the database itself, and it's very difficult to understand what's behind it because it's a proprietary system, we will explore how this can help and can make our life easier, basically.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to being in touch with Evie and your team as you guys start this journey. Thanks very much for that.
Well, thank you for the offer.
I'd like to also welcome Darren White from Turnkey. Turnkey is a newer customer of Servoy, and they've done some really phenomenal stuff over the past 18 months or 2 years. With their IPS product, but I should probably ask Darren to tell you a bit about Turnkey and that product first. Darren, are you there?
Yes, I am, Sean. Yeah, hopefully everyone can hear me.
Yep.
Yeah, so Turnkey software company. We provide a fairly niche piece of software, an ERP system to insolvency practitioners, mainly accountants who are responsible for dealing with insolvent companies and individuals. That's a global offering. We've basically been with Servoy around about a couple of years, rewriting our on-premise solution into a fully functioning SaaS offering, which you'll be pleased to hear is now actually being used in a serious way by some users.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got. In the UK, you know, we've got a very, very high portion of the market. Some 90% of the IP community use our IPS product, and they, as insolvency practitioners, have very complex requirements when it comes to things like company investigation and also putting into plan rescue plans. So when we were approached to do a proof of concept, this to us just made complete and utter sense.
Cool. Yeah, can you talk a bit about what you chose and what use case it satisfied?
Yeah, so the example that you're going to see, so when an insolvency practitioner is appointed over a company, they have to conduct investigations into the company by looking at, generally speaking, the accounting information. Quite often that accounting information is not available. And certainly the use case here is an example of using Xero. Xero, of course, an online SaaS accounting product. And what we're finding and what the IPs find is that the company stops paying their Xero subscription, and so they lose access to it. And so it was fairly obvious to us that if we have a way of being able to extract information from the company end system, give that in our application to the IP can then conduct everything that they need to do, and that can be through automating various processes. For instance, dealing with even simple things like case creation, through to the more complex area of some forensic type work that they have to do around the accounting, identifying whether or not there's been any fraudulent activity on this company and so on.
Sure. And so what we're looking at here is actually data that's been pulled from a Xero account related to this case.
Correct.
And it looks like all the sort of search and filter capability I know that you guys have in the other the other portions of your application, they pretty much function the same here after doing the integration. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, Paolo very quickly. I mean, when I say very quickly, I mean very quickly. Within a day, was able to basically, I think, as you said earlier, Sean, have the data from Xero presented as tables, and then obviously because they were tables, using those as found sets to then give the functionality that you're seeing here. To the standard filter and grid functionality that we're used to in other aspects of the application.
Right. It looks like it's performing pretty well. Did you have any challenges or bumps along the way in the POC?
Really, I think the initial challenge was to try to find how you within Xero find the API key. But we realized that with Xero, there's Xero for the user, and then there's develop Xero, which is used by developers, and that's where we found it. Once we got that, So, I mean, our clients, Xero is just one. Our clients will be dealing with companies that will use a plethora of accounting suites. And again, it was so nice to see when asked. The list of accounting applications that CData connects with, because that's going to cover the majority of the market.
Right. Nice. So what do you think your next steps are?
Yeah, I think the next steps are to maybe take the POC a little bit further, and then look at maybe a couple of other integrations. I was very interested in your comment earlier on about cloud and on-premise, because obviously not all of the accounting systems that our clients are going to be looking at are going to be cloud-based. So, where it's on-premise, again, be looking at how easy it is to set up that connectivity. So I think it may be a good idea as a second proof of concept to try and connect to something on-premise.
Jared, is that something you typically see, that connecting to on-premise systems is a requirement and something that the drivers can do?
Yes and yes. So a lot of times people are trying to connect to even data from an Excel document, but it could be QuickBooks Desktop, or another on-prem like accounting software.
Right.
That's great news for us.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thanks very much for that, Darren. So I know we didn't get too much into the technical aspect of how to set it up or how to do it, but but I'm happy to announce that if you'd like to get started, we will be offering a promotional special, I guess a Halloween promotion, if you will, through the end of the month. And I put some information here in this slide if you're in the EU or in North America of whom to contact. Of course, if you have a direct line to me that you've used before or another channel, you feel free to use that as well. And in the meantime, I'll leave this open and open up the webinar to questions that you guys have, either about what's supported in the CData drivers, or how integrations work, or how to go forward with Servoy, really anything. I know that last time we had loads of questions, Jared. So I'm guessing that most of these participants maybe had already seen the demo that I did, where I showed how to set it up, and it really took a few minutes, and we connected to Salesforce. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, we got one. Okay, how do you map graph data to a database? And I'm going to kick that over to you, Jared, because I don't exactly know what that means, graph data.
Yeah, so I would have to guess that, and so if I'm off here, you know, please correct in the. Okay, so like the Facebook. So
Facebook, yeah, that's what I
yeah.
was.
So are you talking about like the GraphQL API? So that's something that our developers are currently working on. We don't have a direct integration for GraphQL to to a driver as it stands right now, just because of some of the subtleties in the way that GraphQL APIs work. But any other API that's exposed on Facebook, we can do like what I talked about. So you get entities that are surfaced as tables. I know that the eventual goal is to be able to essentially translate an SQL or a SQL query into a GraphQL query for the specific API. But from the question, you can imagine that is a less than trivial process. So it is something that we're working on. And then, so the other question that just came in from the same attendee is, do we have connectors to IoT devices? That's also something that we're working on. The short answer is, if it has an API, we can make a connector for it, or you may be able to use some of our customizable connectors. So we have, a basic REST API connector, a basic JSON connector. So if the API is RESTful or if it's JSON based, you can configure that driver to work with that data. Getting streaming data to look like a database presents challenges, but IoT is something else that we're looking at. So the questions are continuing to roll in. So do you want me to just keep fielding these, Sean, or do you want to?
Yeah, well, I wanted to bring up the point you said where what you guys are working on. I know that you mentioned to me that I think the last time we did this, you were in the process of adding some new drivers, and I'm wondering, Servoy as an OEM partner of CData, if we came to you guys and said, hey, our community is really interested in something that you don't support, are those things that you guys consider adding?
Absolutely, yes. And that's probably the majority of the way that we added data sources, is either current customers or customers or partners come to us and say that they are interested in connecting to X, Y, or Z.
Right.
Can we make a driver for it? Well,
that's good to hear. We have another question from an attendee who's interested in Navision, but also Box and Office 365, wondering how to pick and download those and look at them. So what I would say is go ahead and contact me or one of the appropriate email address you see on the screen, and we can put together a proof of concept to take a look at your use case and take a look at the connectors and talk about a path for how to get started. Okay. Well, it doesn't look like there's, oh, no, there's one more there. There's one about SharePoint. And that's also the Microsoft Graph API. I don't know.
Right. So I don't know which API that we use. We do integrate with SharePoint, and you can get a list of the folders and files that are available there. But I'm not sure which API works. So for that attendee, again, I would contact somebody at Servoy to walk through the use case.
Yep.
You can look over the SharePoint driver to see exactly what it exposes. And Sean, it looks like there's one more in the chat, not in the Q&A.
Oh, I was looking for that because I saw in the chat. Oh, there's a couple in the chat. I didn't see those. Is there a connector for Gmail? Yeah, there is, right, Jared?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So there's one other question that says, if I use connectors for 2 or more different applications, will Servoy manage the data updates and conflicts? Not exactly sure the use case here, but if you mean two different separate applications or concurrent users, maybe Jared, you could talk a bit about, is the driver always requery, or is it doing some caching?
So that's configurable. I think from the get-go, anytime you submit a request, it's going to refresh the data. But you can configure caching as well, and we support caching locally or to the cloud. So you can cache your data to something as simple as like a SQLite database, or you can cache it to a MySQL database, or like a cloud database.
Yeah.
And then to kind of piggyback off that question, if you have multiple users, it's just like a database. So, you can create a separate connection string with the same driver for different users, or to talk to different, what essentially could be databases.
Right. Yeah, and there's some options to work with that in Servoy as well, because Servoy has a cache. It actually is doing a lot of caching and updating of the cache for traditional databases as well. And there are some APIs there to invalidate the cache. So probably if you left the drivers in requery mode all the time, then use the Servoy APIs to manage the cache when you suspect that data could be have been updated. Typically the way we deal with when other separate applications are connecting to a backend. So I think there's a lot of tools there to manage that, and that's probably something that we'll encounter when we do some implementation support. And it's the best part is that because this uses the same exact interface that Servoy is used to, all of these little bumps that can come up are things that we've dealt with over many years with many customers. And so I feel pretty confident that this approach is so native to Servoy that I don't anticipate issues, for example, like with caching and conflicts. Okay, well, I think we're at the 40-minute mark here, and that's a perfect duration for a Servoy Tech Series webinar. So I would like to, first of all, to thank our speakers, Jared, Miguel Angel, and Darren, for taking their time and energy to join us. I really appreciate it, guys. And to also thank the attendees. This is a 3-part webinar series about integrations, and we have one coming up next week. Don't worry if you're already registered and in this meeting, then you will get email notifications about that webinar. It's at the same time Wednesday next week. So thanks everyone, and we'll be back soon.